Knock knock. Who's there? CLOUDDEAD. This doesn't really follow our expectations of what a joke is. It has recognizable parts and features that you would identify as being elements of a joke, but stylistically and almost in its intention, it fails to deliver on the same promises of what we expect from a joke. And yet this joke became the namesake for a musical project that went on to do very similar things, but to the styles and expectations of rap music. Yes, the experimental hip-hop trio known as CLOUDDEAD, featuring 2 MCs and 1 producer, as well as a number of guests on all of their various different songs, each of whom kind of had their hand in the founding of the label Anticon in the late 90s. And speaking of the late 90s, that's when these 3 came together to form CLOUDDEAD, and their first album, which we're talking about today, the self-titled CLOUDDEAD, technically a compilation album, is assembled from the A and B sides of the first 6 singles that they released as a trio. And this album is controversial.
My whole childhood is a broken guitar, my sister's silly yellow blanket, now I can't reach that.
Above all else, CLOUDDEAD is difficult to describe, and some of that seems like it's on purpose. Obscurity, beyond being a musical principle that the band deploys, is also something that they just follow through with in their interviews and the rare, precious live footage that exists of them performing any of these songs.
I don't even know where I've been. In the basement, cooking the gas main. Something's been left out of this game. God, did you remember to render everything? I've seen it.
This is hip-hop. It just is. It's inarguably hip-hop, and the instrumentals are where you can best go to see that, as they feature unmistakable hallmarks of the genre in its beats and samples, and yet there's almost no other rap music that you could even mistake CLOUDDEAD for. The performances can be quite minimal and often very verbose, but never in the way of like a Billy Woods or Ka. The instrumentation is quite cloudy and often abstract, but in no way is it all that similar to early A$AP Rocky or Young Lean. And the lyricism is another familiar trope of hip-hop, the combination of the overtly poetic with the achingly authentic, but you would never mistake any of these lyrics for having come from Little Sims or Kendrick Lamar. Lyrics on the opening song, Apartment A, read, "I fall asleep hoping tomorrow tastes like poems and honeysuckle. I move slowly 'cause the sky looks bluer when you fuck the order of the day." As much as the recognizable motifs of hip-hop, the trio's music is defined by the sonic aesthetics of genres like indie rock and even ambient. Take Jimmy Breeze 2, for example, which opens up seeming almost ambient with no flavor of hip-hop in tone, and then all of a sudden...
You sound like I got all the boys over here. Say hi to Jimmy Breeze. Hey!
It seems I'm only me and sleep where we meet and dream.
There are a lot of genre labels that we can try to apply to CLOUDDEAD. Alternative rap, experimental rap, lo-fi rap, cloud rap, even post-rap. But while all of these styles can apply to CLOUDDEAD's music, none of them paint the full picture. The trio's willingness to follow their ambitions on a whim to absolutely wherever that may take them means that the only consistent thing about listening to these 12 tracks is their ability and willingness to surprise you. And while yes, these instrumentals can be challenging and maybe even a little confrontational, even for veteran fans of hip-hop, by this point, we are no stranger to the style of hip-hop leaking into the music of other genres. But that isn't the most contentious thing about CLOUDDEAD. Not even close.
Miss Boba Fett as I go along.
I'm rejecting the truths that I've been served.
The lyrical format on this album and the mechanism through which those lyrics are delivered throughout can best be described as uncompromising. The group doesn't seek to subvert the cadences and flows of conventional hip-hop entirely just to stretch them to their absolute limit. And what results is often layering of vocals, chaotic switching up of flows and rhythms that can sometimes make it difficult to even pin down exactly what the lyrical content of this record even is. And those lyrics are really where we see the trio leave the realm of hip-hop as we understand it entirely. Back to that earlier example, the lyrics combine together in a way that is both exceptionally earnest while also being confrontationally metaphorical. Example from All You Can Do Is Laugh. Show and tell with a gag blindfold wrapped around the entire congregation. Constraints. Or later in the song, a leaf in its twilight looks like $1,000,000, light like pink paint you couldn't buy before synthetics. To sit under the first autumn tree in the park and watch a t-ball practice just before dark. Sunset is an all-day process. In the 20 years since CLOUDDEAD was first released, dedicated fans have pulled apart every single breaking element of the project, identifying both recurring lyrical motifs and concepts, as well as identifying the individual, unique elements of each MC involved. And this is the point in the video where I kind of have to drop the veneer of the impartial and impersonal video essay girl. I adore this album. Like so many in my tweens and teen years, I was getting really into hip-hop, first with mainstream hip-hop, then more experimental flavors, and while CLOUDDEAD did not immediately stick out to me as a record that would one day go on to be one of my favorite of all time, it just had a magnetism to it that I couldn't resist for very long. Even though I didn't have the right words to explain it, just one listen to the record all those years ago, and it already had its hooks in me and would keep dragging me back over and over and over again until I completely fell in love with it. My name is Lavender, by the way. If this is the first Music Corner video you're ever seeing, stick around. Maybe you'll like some of the other stuff I've done. And yet, even on this record that I absolutely love, there is a song that stands head and shoulders above the rest of the track list to become one of my favorite pieces of experimental hip-hop and experimental music in general of all time. A song whose word-bending verses, mysterious vocal layering, and constant compositional shifts are permanently drilled into my head.
I can gather myself forces a very fairly small human. I am
The hilariously titled I Promise to Never Get Paint on My Glasses Again starts with a vinyl crackle and transitions into an opening verse whose quotables can go toe-to-toe with anyone in hip-hop. Lyrics are worked in between various layers of sound, which alternate sometimes on a whim between rapped verses and occasional sung refrains over top of them. The first half of the song is handled exclusively by Doswan, who muses on the haziness of many of his childhood memories while comparing the more stark and vivid moments that he remembers in contrast. The song isn't just purely a meditation on these memories, though. It is a journey with steps that, by the end of the first half, allows Doswan and guest rapper Soleil a platform to completely take over. The song's refusal to settle on a particular style is an absolute marvel, which results in some incredible moments like this wall of incomprehensible, eerie whispering used as a transition, and also the complete fade out around the track's midpoint. After which, it reemerges with a much more vivid manifestation of hip-hop as the two MCs go back to back over a pretty standard and familiar drum pattern.
All these suck it today, take it the garbage, I am an anti. Credit, be broken, the loudest the tables, I don't make up the check.
The two contrasting halves of this song work together brilliantly, and the frenetic, chaotic moments it has at its most unhinged are earned by methodical execution of absolutely excellent songwriting throughout. And yet, throughout their time as a band, CLOUDDEAD constantly faced an uphill battle at trying to be identified as even being rap music at all. For one reason or many, there were a lot of voices out there insistent that the trio were imposters within their own genre. But 2 decades later, not only are they more hip-hop than ever, but so many of the defining stylistic risks they took as a trio went on to inspire the next generations of hip-hop influencers. And I think they kind of knew that was going to happen all along, because at the end of this song, they pretty much say it.
It's all the same shit, but they call it cLOUDDEAD. I only got 2 hands and half a head. It's all the same shit, but they call it cLOUDDEAD. I only got 2 hands and half a head.
I cannot promise you that if you listen to this record, you'll enjoy it. It's an extremely challenging listen. It just is, even to those whose musical diet may already include some pretty experimental hip-hop flavors. This thing is just confrontational and uncompromising. But I think if you really do give this record the very definition of an honest shot, even if you don't like it in the moment, it might put its hooks in you, just like it did to me. And at some point, weeks, months, maybe even years from now, you might have the desire to once again return to cLOUDDEAD's hazy, unpredictable hip-hop dystopia. One final lyric. Are you scared that the album will end before the doorbell rings, and you'll be left to greet your guests with a tied tongue, cold lunch, and spent wick candle? Knock knock. Who's there? cLOUDDEAD.
It's all the same shit, but they call it cLOUDDEAD. I only got 2 hands and half a head. It's all the same shit, but they call it cLOUDDEAD. I only got 2 hands.